Hello, my name is Lee Presser. This is my show. I speak frequently to very interesting people. Some of these conversations are so exciting, so intellectually stimulating, I thought others might like to listen in. This is the reason we started recording Conversation with Lee Presser.
Welcome to Conversation with Lee Presser. My guest, Elliott Davis, is best known in Metro St. Louis for the You Paid For It segments seen during KTVI Fox 2 News. Mr. Davis, his investigations into questionable spending of public funds and out-of-the-mainstream decisions by public officials have made him a hero to taxpayers and an unwanted guest in some offices and at some meetings. For his journalistic work, he has been awarded an Emmy Award in 2002 for Best Investigative Report and the St. Louis Black Journalism Award in 2001, 2, and 3 for Best Television Series. Elliott Davis, welcome to Conversation.
Well, thanks, Lee.
Okay, let's go back. I mean, we were talking about this on the off the air, and so a lot of people probably don't know that you didn't start in television. You actually started the newspaper business.
I actually started working after Cornell University and came back, and I was ready for my oak panel office with the secretary and everything, as most kids have a vision of what they're going to do. And I ended up working in a factory, Calgon, mopping the factory floor. So that was actually my first job.
College graduate.
Yeah.
At least you had a job.
At minimum wage, and minimum wage back then was about $3.40 an hour or something like that. So that dates me considerably. But that was my first job. Then onto McDonnell Douglas from that, negotiating contracts, and then quit that because I wanted to do something else, what I wasn't sure. And then ended up out of work for a little bit, moving back into my mom's house. That was no fun when you sit down and find yourself in the room you grew up in, and you say, how did I end up back here anyway? So I got a job at a newspaper, Suburban Journals, and basically my job was selling advertisement for the North County and Northside Journal. And I'd have park the old Torino and get a bundle of newspapers, walking up and down the street, stopping in the mom and pop stores, trying to sell an ad. And that's basically how I got started. But it was a good experience.
Mm-hmm. And you're still selling today, but you're selling something else. How did you get from selling ads for the Suburban Journals into the television business? There's a lot of people that want to be you. There's no doubt about it. And they think that it's a simple step. You just need the right break. But I mean, how did you go about it?
Well, I always tell folks just to be the best that they can be, to be the best them that they can be. But my story was simply, I was looking at television when I wanted to do something else other than sell newspaper advertising. I was grateful for that opportunity, but wanted to do something else. Someone saw someone stumbling through the news one day and said, I can stumble through the news. And what the heck, I can stumble with the best of them. Essentially went down to Channel 5. I remember I had this old Chrysler New Yorker. It was like just old, like a 1972 Chrysler New Yorker with huge speakers in the back and everything that, would provide music for the whole street when I went down it. And I remember going down to Channel 5, and I had this suit on, and it would change colors and stuff. Silk mohair, you remember that back in the days,
yes.
Right? And when you're inside, it's like green. When you go outside, it turns like brown or something like that. Anyway, so I pull up in front of Channel 5, this big, huge gold Chrysler New Yorker, right? Parked in front. I go in with the suit and this polka dot tie, and I said, I'd like to talk to the person in charge. I had nothing if not nerve. They said, who might you be? I said, I'm Elliott Davis. And they said, what is an Elliott Davis? And so, but they told me his name, and he just happened to be in the lobby talking, so I walked up to him. And I said, excuse me, I forgot his name at the time, but I said, excuse me, but if you've got, 1 minute, I got some ideas that I think you'll like. And he says, I got a minute, two. Yeah, he was in
a very good sales opening, by the way.
I bet that sales helped.
Yes.
And the 2-minute meeting turned into a 3-hour conversation. And after that, about 6 months later, I got a letter asking if I wanted to host a talk show, Public Affairs. I knew all the political leaders around town because that wrote a little column for a newspaper. And so 6 months later, got a letter asking me if I wanted to host a talk show. Did that for about a year and a half. And it was going great until a producer at the time decided that she wanted to have her buddy host a talk show that I was hosting. The guy who got me the job went on sabbatical or something like that. You know how that goes. So I got thrown off my show. So
that you invented.
Well, I didn't invent it, but I got lucky enough to stumble into it.
Yeah.
So I get thrown off the show because she puts her buddy in. You know how it goes. And so I said, well, let's see, it worked once, why not try it again? So I went over to Channel 2 and said, who's in charge? And introduced me to a guy named Vic Skaggs. I think he was program director at the time. And I talked to him, and he introduced me to the news director at the time. It was a guy named Cecil Tuck. And Cecil said, well, I don't have any openings, you know. I said, but that's okay. I'd like to learn the business. He said, but you can stumble around with the producers and everybody and reporters and learn the business. So I started off working free at Channel 2, kind of learning the business. I'd bring them stories, and it let me get on the air and actually do some stories, because I'd find out about indictments coming down on key political figures, because after all, it was kind of plugged in. And he would assign a writer and a photographer, and I'd put it on the air, and I get like $35 every time my story aired. But that's, in a nutshell, is kind of how I got going.
I find it interesting that, you know, you had guts enough to go in there and say, all right, I'll do it for free, just to really get your foot in the door.
We have nothing to lose.
Exactly.
You know, I had my main gig selling the newspaper advertising, so I had some income coming in. And to me, it was just a way to get started. And I always, you know, advise people, if you want to do something, you know, take a chance. Try not to take no for an, or at least try to remove the objections to you getting an opportunity. So I was blessed and I was fortunate that the right people were there when I showed up. So I just believe in my life I've just been tremendously blessed with opportunities.
Now, who came up with the idea for the You Paid For It format? Was that you, or was that somebody in there?
No, I can't take credit for it. It was a news director named Bill Barra, and I was doing kind of investigative reporting at the time, and Bill had seen a franchise. You paid for it somewhere in Washington, not Washington, D.C., but Washington State. And so I was doing this story, and I think the first one was like Mayor Bosley or something. He had hired this person for $400,000 to investigate waste and license in the ticket office, and that job had already been done. So it was a deal they were giving out. And so Barra, and the way Barra's twist on it was that he said, look, is there, you know, you can do this story, but is there any number that we can give people a call? I mean, if people are outraged, what do they do? So he said, is there a number? I said, well, I guess I could call the mayor. And they said, well, can we give his number? I said, sure, I don't care. Let's do it. And so, you know, that was the first one. I think Mayor Bosley was the first number I gave out. And then we went through a time where a number of us were kind of doing different You Paid For It reports. I was doing most of them. Mandy Murphy was briefly on the You Paid For It team.
Really?
That's something a lot of people don't know because it was short-lived, but and I remind her about it sometimes. And she didn't know she was going to be a part of the You Paid For It team until she saw the promo on the air, and it said, Elliott Davis, Mandy Murphy, the You Paid For It team. And I went up to her and said, Mandy, welcome to the You Paid For It team. And she said, thank you, Elliott, I appreciate that. And we had a couple of people doing it. But ultimately, Barra just narrowed it down and said, Elliott, you do it. And so he wanted me to do it for full time and just do that. And I said, well, Bill, I don't mind doing this. You paid for it, and I like doing this. But I also want to be a part of general assignment because, you know, I'm covering the homicides and the big stories, the fires and all the other things that I was used to covering, going live TV. I love live TV, so I didn't want to miss out on that. And so I was kind of doing both, and I would do You Paid For It every now and then when something came my way. Bill was insistent that I focus my energies on this. And so he called me in one day and said, okay, Elliott, I'm taking you off the desk. I'm putting you, just focus on you paid for it. I'll get somebody else to do all that other stuff. You just do this. And I said, okay, Bill. Didn't know how it was all going to turn out, but you know, when your boss gives you a directive, what do? Salute, say yes, sir, and go forward. Mm-hmm. And that's what I did, and it's worked out.
Mm-hmm. And who was the next guy after that? Do you remember? Was that Brad Remington?
No, Brad was kind of two people later. It was a Rick Urbach, and then Brad Remington came, and Brad gave me a lot more freedom.
He was a guest on this show back when he was the news director, and he was very high on your program and the things that he wanted you to do. He saw you much more as an editorial writer, or that sort of a thing, as opposed to being an objective news reporter.
Yeah, and so it took it to a whole new level with Brad Remington. Who came in and gave me a free hand to tackle topics at a much higher level. We started out with a big run-in with then Governor Carnahan, and then we were just kind of, then a number of other people with county executives, state senators, and a bunch of other people. And it took just on a more aggressive tone, and that's something that our current news director, Audrey Pryorich, has continued. And so I've, like I said, I've just been blessed to have good people who have saw the value in the franchise. And I always say this: to do this, you have to have strong management backing, because you get so many people demanding your head on a platter.
Oh,
I mean,
sure.
they feel the calls. General Manager Spencer Koch and Audrey right now. Yeah. And Brad Remington then all took the calls. We've had mayors coming to the station saying, this story is wrong. He got this wrong. That's not the way it happened. Well, you have to be right, of course. But they would come, and I demand that he be fired today. And so they have to take those calls. And normally, I'm not in the meeting defending my stories. The general manager and news directors are. So if I, there's been just a ton of political leaders who say, you need to fire that guy. He's the worst journalist in creation. That guy is no good. And he's a disgrace to journalism. I've been called everything, I'm telling you. So they have to, to stand up and to the politicians and say, no, we stand behind the story or whatever, or mollify feelings. But so you do really have to, and I've had it. Some strong management backing for this, because there's no other way you could do something like this, because you're talking about stepping on toes, you're stomping on toes, and you're looking for toes to stomp on. Mm-hmm.
High-level toes.
High-level toes. These are people who are fully capable when you go and you're dealing with, we were out with doing critical stories of Governor Blagojevich before he had the total meltdown. We were, remember I
remember you jumped down you ran down some hill or something to get at him before he got on his airplane one time.
Right. When Blagojevich, what did I want to question about? Mississippi River Bridge or something like that?
Yeah, that it was a big
waste of money.
The Welcome Center.
Yeah, he was talking to me around the time of the Welcome Center. By the time the Mississippi River Bridge came along, he probably knew there were federal investigations, and he probably didn't know what I was going to ask him about. So, but only thing he knew is that he didn't want to talk, and so he ran through the kitchen. I'm waiting out in front for Blagojevich to come out with all the other. It was a meeting over in St. Louis. I'm waiting out front for Blagojevich to come out with all the other political leaders that were, coming out the front door, and he sneaks downstairs through a kitchen. The kitchen was like in a basement. So, I can imagine what the chefs and everybody were thinking. Here's the governor sneaking through the kitchen. They said, boy, is that the governor? Yes. So so his limousine swings around back to the kitchen door, and we see him, and I'm trying to run down the step, almost slip and fall, trying to get down to try to catch up with the governor. He's in his limousine with the blacked out windows, and the limousine, he hops in the car. I'm the limousine slowly backing up. I'm banging on the window saying, Governor, I'd like to ask you a question. I got the microphone here. It's just surreal. And the limo is, is pulling out. So we go to the airport to Parks. I guess it's Spirit of St. Louis now. So we go to the St. Louis downtown airport now. But we go to the airport, so maybe we can catch him then. So we go to the airport just as Blagojevich is getting on the plane. There's no sign on the door that says you can't go out into the tarmac, right? So we're looking, no sign. So we see the governor's plane, we say, well, let's go get him. There's no sign. So we run out to the governor's plane, the props going, and the people are getting on the plane, and we're asking the governor, we're like, at the doorway of the plane, say, Governor, can you come out and talk? And it's a strange scene, and his security guy said, Governor's on the plane. I said, yeah, but can he come off the plane? And so by that time, some more security people said, well, you have to leave. And of course, the rest of Blagojevich is history. But yeah.
Speaking of security, two things. One, you got shot at once. I think one of your crew actually got hit.
Right.
You can talk about that, but also, do you now go with security? Are you protected, or you're just out there, there you are?
No, we're just out there. And my cameraman, Larry Washington, was shot while we were investigating a story in St. Louis at a towing company.
Yeah.
And
that wasn't the same one that eventually got found out and those guys went to prison.
Yeah. They eventually went to jail. It turned out it was a cocaine ring. They were using the tow trucks to sell cocaine. Of course, I didn't know that at the time. I thought it was just, that's just some towing. We were investigating for it because they were several municipalities had
$500,
hired those guys.
Towing bill?
Several municipalities hired those guys to run. And let me add this: there's no evidence, no hard evidence that the people who ran the towing company were responsible for the shooting. The shooting.
Okay, we got that clarified.
There's no evidence to that effect.
You just happened to be in the area when that happened.
The lawyers always tell me to say that. Right. Any event,
in my opinion, they also say that too.
There is no evidence that the two are related.
Right.
But we were investigating. So we were investigating these high towing fees that these municipalities hired the towing company to tow cars. They were towing these cars and they were charging people $500 and $600. So we were investigating that story, and we had done one story and we were about to do another. And in the interim, we were outside doing a stand-up, outside the towing company that we were investigating, doing a stand-up, and I hear these pops, right? And my first thought is that, man, 4th of July. And I'm thinking, but it's May. It's not the 4th of July. And so, so I walk in the back and my cameraman says, I'm shot. And so Larry, he has Larry Washington, my photographer. He had been shot right here, barely misses carotid artery. They said a few millimeters more and he would have died. He would have bled to death and gone into shock. So Larry's shot and it's all surreal. I'm on the phone. I had been standing by the car on the phone with MoDOT, and people at MoDOT had called right after I said I threw down the phone. MoDOT calls the station and says, I think something's going on. I was on the phone with Elliott and he said, Larry shot, and threw down the phone. So anyway, Larry, we get in the car. Larry gets in the driver's seat, right, to drive the car. And I said, let me drive the car because you're shot. So he said, the company tripod is, in front of the truck. I don't care about the tripod, right? All I know is we're on the fire. And Larry said, get the tripod. And I'm thinking, the tripod? And so I get out to get the tripod, and I'm thinking all the time, I'm going to get shot in the back, getting out of this car to get the company tripod. How stupid is this? And so anyway, Larry starts driving his car down the street. We're going down Page Avenue or something, Natural Bridge or whatever the case might be. He's fading in and out. Larry's stubborn. He's an old Army man. So he is stubborn, won't let me drive the car. He's starting to fade out. And I'm thinking, going to have a head-on collision because this guy won't let me, drive the car. Finally, after a short distance, you can see he's kind of fading out. He pulls over, and I drive us the rest of the way to the hospital. And he's kind of fading out as we go. So that was one of the most dramatic times. And the station got me after that, they bought a bulletproof vest. And for a while, we did have a security guard because we were going. When Larry got shot, and I increased the number of stories I did on the towing company. I think we did 60 stories in that year on that same towing company.
That's quite a bit.
Yeah. So But next time I went out to the towing company, we had an armed guard. I know they wear the bulletproof vest. I just said, I'm not doing that. But some photographers, of course, were reluctant to work with me. And they said, "You want a bulletproof vest?" I said, "Nah, man." So, but we had some great guys who did step up. Some photographers who did step up. They were not afraid, and we went back out there with the guard. And it was a strange scene because we're walking up to the towing company. It was like a scene out of Wild Wild West. We're walking up to get the guy in the towing company. I'm walking, I got the mic, the guard is behind me, he's got he's got the pistol on the side, and so everybody's moving towards this company. Ultimately, the way that story ended was the head of the towing company, eventually the Attorney General, who was then Jay Nixon, got involved in the case and indicted him on state charges relating to towing. Unbeknownst to us, the federal government, as a result probably of all this exposure, federal government launched an investigation. And a year later announced indictments that
cocaine, which you didn't know about.
Cocaine, which we didn't know about, and he got like 10 years in federal penitentiary. So that was probably the most dramatic.
Mm-hmm. We have about like 7-8 minutes left here to this show. So I want to switch gears to the thoughtful Elliott Davis here right now and talk about the changes that you've observed in the news delivery over your years in the business. There was a time when guys like Max Roby were very much like Walter Cronkite, and that's how the local news was presented. When you look at today's local news and how it's presented, it's far more glitzy, far more entertaining. What's your assessment of this? Are people who are the watchers, are they getting the kind of and quality of news that they should be getting about government issues that affect them?
I think they are. Society has changed, and you've got to change with society if you're going to stay in business. When you boil it down, television is a business. It is not like you can put on you can put things in a format that people won't watch. And you can try to lecture to people and say, here's an issue I think is important, and you get to the people out to talk about it in prime time. While I think there's a great place for it, that's why we have Meet the Press and Face the Nation and all of these programs. And locally, we have the JCO Report, as you had mentioned beforehand, to do that. But you've got to figure out how do you present the issues in prime time and get people to watch. So it's like sugarcoating the medicine. Because you can't make people sit down and watch and listen to a politician for an hour tell you how great things are. America's view of politicians is different than it used to be. For example, I think there was more willingness to accept politicians' words for things then, when I started, than there is now. People hear politicians now and they figure whatever they're saying is not the way it is. And so in answer to your question, I think television news does a good job of presenting the most important issue and trying to get it in a way that the public will listen to it and digest it. So all in all, I think that TV news does a pretty good job of doing that. You paid for it, and we try to.
Now, see, that's a whole different. I mean, that's your job,
right,
is to make people see corruption or proposed.
But I think generally television news, they will take what they perceive as the most important issues of the day, try to present it in as interesting a way as possible. That's the best way. Otherwise, people won't watch it. If nobody watches, what have you accomplished?
That's true. Unfortunately, it leads to things like out in LA, not every other day, but on a regular basis, they've got cars being chased by the police, and so all of news focuses. And I've noticed that even here in St. Louis on a couple of occasions, that the local news has suddenly focused on a car chase, the same as what we've seen out of LA.
Because it's interesting. News basically will give people to a certain extent what they believe the people will want to see. And when you start looking at what the ratings are, you can tell what people want to see and what they don't want to see.
That's
why
true.
when you show them what they want to see, the ratings will go up. If you put up what they don't want to see, the ratings will go down. People will turn off. And there's so much competition. There's cable and all of these shows. So when you look back to Cronkite and those guys and Huntley Brinkley and Peter Jennings and all those guys, there's three main guys. Three main networks, and then we look at a local level, just 2, 4, and 5. And so that's why people got all their news and information. So in a sense, you've got a captive audience that people have just limited places to go. Now there's a great world of options that people have, and I even adding in the internet that people can go to get and news on demand. So I don't have to wait until 6 o'clock to find out what's going on. I can now hit my cell phone. You know, if I got a smartphone, I can just go on my smartphone and put in something, say what's going on with that story. I can get sports, I can get everything. So I'm not having to wait like we did in the Cronkite time till 5:30 for Walter to tell us everything that's going on in the world right now. It's instant information. And that's the way it is. And that's the way it is.
Right. I understand entirely, especially the business portion of television and giving people what they want so that they'll come back. The problem, as I see it, is really that in Illinois, for example, I don't know how many billions or trillions in debt that these people are, and it was not, I get the feeling, it was never described to the people of Illinois. This is happening to you. Someday, eventually, this is going to be the outcome.
Well, I think in Illinois, it's the state, and we're working on the story, is Illinois headed towards a Greek-style meltdown, like Greece had, with its sovereign debt crisis. Right. And you look at Illinois with the underfunded pensions and not being able to pay its bills, and so you're looking at all that many times, and we've done stories about that. For example, we've done stories about where the Illinois legislature should cut their pay. These guys are getting $67,000 a year, and the state's all messed up. And if they were CEOs, they've been thrown out the door. And I'm going to look at Illinois department heads. What are they getting paid? If they're asking taxpayers to raise their taxes, then we should slash their pay at least 10%, 15%, because during the height of the economic meltdown, a lot of CEOs had to work for $1. I'm not saying these guys should work for $1, maybe $5. But no, I'm not saying that. But remember, the whole country was saying when they had that meltdown that CEOs should work for $1 or certainly work for less, right. No dividends, no this, and it was telling the companies to cut. Why shouldn't Illinois politicians take the pain? These legislators getting $67,000 to House members a year. They get the per diem. They get $60,000 to run their district offices. Why can't they take a pay cut? And give back some of their money? Why can't they take an example? And they're saying we're all suffering. No, the people are suffering. The taxpayers are suffering. The politicians are getting paid. And so that is a story that we are working on about the Illinois politicians' pay. We went up to Madigan's office to try to catch him. I got his spokesman. That's as far as I
saw that. That was a great story. We'll have to talk about that another time. We've run clean out of time. Elliott Davis, thank you very much for being with us today. And to my audience, I've been speaking with Elliott Davis. If you don't know who he is, your television dial doesn't go to Channel 2. He's a well-known man. He does an excellent job. We're very pleased to have him here with us. And for those of you who are regular viewers of this program, we will see you next Monday. Thank you very much for being with us, and goodbye.